Hey guys, tonight we're stepping away from the clashing swords and dragon-prowed longships that often dominate our image of the Viking Age. We're venturing beyond the mead hall boasts and the sagas of legendary warriors to explore a different kind of strength, a different kind of endurance. Tonight, you find yourself not on a raiding voyage, but in the heart of a bustling, smoky Viking settlement, somewhere in Scandinavia, around the 9th or 10th century. Your world is not one of plunder and far-flung exploration, but of the vital, meticulous, and often back-breaking labor that formed the true backbone of Viking society. You are a weaver, a woman whose hands create not just cloth, but warmth, status, and the very sails that carry those famous warriors across the unforgiving seas. It's a quiet life in comparison, perhaps, but as we'll discover, it's a life demanding a resilience and skill set that many a bearded axeman might secretly admire, or frankly, utterly fail at. Tonight's reality check. You, with your appreciation for ergonomic chairs and machine-made fabrics, probably wouldn't last a season trying to meet the textile demands of a Viking household, using only the tools and techniques of the era. The sheer physical grind, the monotonous repetition, and the constant battle against dirt, cold, and darkness would be a sterner test than many an imagined heroic quest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, do drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always a profound experience to connect with our global community of thoughtful listeners as you settle in from your corner of the modern world, so far removed from the longhouse we're about to enter. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together into the surprisingly demanding world of a Viking weaver. The very fabric of Viking society, quite literally, was woven by women. While the sagas sing praises of men who conquer and explore, archaeological finds, from grave sites to settlement excavations, consistently reveal the profound importance and prevalence of textile production. Every scrap of clothing, from a simple tunic to an elaborately embroidered cloak, every sail that billowed powerfully in the North Atlantic winds, every blanket that offered meager protection against the biting Scandinavian winter, began as raw fiber transformed by your skilled, patient hands. This wasn't a hobby, a quaint pastime. This was essential high-stakes work, a family's survival, a chieftain's status, a ship's ability to voyage. All depended in no small part on the output of weavers like you. The sheer volume of cloth required was immense. Consider a single woolen sail for a longship. Scholars estimate it could take several women, working diligently, up to 2 years or more to process the wool from hundreds of sheep, and then weave such a massive, durable textile. That's a staggering commitment of time and labor, a silent testament to the weaver's crucial role. Your life, though centered around the homestead, is far from idle or easy. It's a constant cycle of preparing fibers, spinning yarn, dyeing, and finally, the intricate, physically demanding process of weaving on the warp-weighted loom. Each stage requires specialized knowledge passed down through generations, a keen eye for quality, and a body conditioned to long hours of repetitive, often uncomfortable, work. The quiet in your life is the quiet of intense concentration, the quiet of a skill honed through years of practice, punctuated not by the clash of steel, but by the rhythmic clack of the shuttle, the thud of the weaving sword, and the soft hum of the spinning spindle. This is where the real, everyday heroism of the Viking Age often resided in the enduring, unsung labor that kept society clothed, sheltered, and mobile. And as we step into your day, you'll soon realize that this quiet life possesses its own unique set of challenges, its own gory details, and demands a fortitude that is anything but delicate. The first fingers of pale, watery light are just beginning to seep through the smoke hole in the roof of the longhouse, doing little to dispel the gloom within. You stir from your sleep, not on a soft mattress, but likely on a straw-filled pallet or a wooden bench covered with animal furs, shared with other members of your extended family. The air you inhale is thick, a familiar cocktail of wood smoke from the central hearth that has smoldered through the night. Unwashed bodies, stored food, and perhaps the faint, earthy scent of the livestock that might be quartered at one end of the dwelling during the harshest months. This is your home, the Viking longhouse, a long, narrow, often windowless structure, the heart of the farmstead. For you, a weaver, it is also your primary workshop. Rising in the pre-dawn chill, your first movements are stiff. The floor beneath your bare feet is cold, compacted earth, or rough-hewn wooden planks. There's no central heating here, only the large open fire pit in the middle of the main room, which serves for cooking, light, and warmth. Its efficiency as a heating source is debatable. Much of the heat, along with a significant portion of the smoke, escapes through the roof opening, while the rest circulates, stinging your eyes and coating every surface with a fine layer of soot. Archaeologists and historians studying Viking Age longhouses often debate the severity of indoor air pollution, but evidence from skeletal remains sometimes suggests respiratory ailments were common. You can almost feel that slight rasp in your throat as you take your first deep breaths of the day, a chronic irritation you've likely lived with your entire life. Your morning ablutions are simple. A splash of cold water on your face from a wooden basin, perhaps. There are no scented soaps, no running water. Personal hygiene is a practical affair, focused more on function than luxury. You dress quickly in the semi-darkness, pulling on your woolen tunic, perhaps an overdress or apron, securing it with a belt from which might hang a few essential tools, a knife, a small pouch. Your clothing, of course, is a product of your own or another woman's labor, likely a bit coarse, patched in places, but durable and warm, a testament to the weaver's skill. The longhouse is slowly coming to life. Children are stirring, their sleepy murmurs mingling with the crackle of the rekindled fire. The men might be preparing for a day in the fields, tending to animals, or, if the season is right, preparing for a trading voyage or a raid. Endeavors that ultimately rely on the sales and provisions your community produces. Your first task, before even thinking about your loom, is likely to contribute to the preparation of the morning meal. This might involve grinding grain for porridge, or flatbreads using a rotary quern or a saddle quern, back-breaking work in itself. Fetching water from the well or stream, or tending the fire. The diet is monotonous but hearty when available. Oat or barley porridge, perhaps some dried fish or meat if the stores are good. Skyr, a type of yogurt, and dark, heavy bread. You eat quickly, a utilitarian refueling for the day's labor ahead. There is no lingering over coffee. There is only the pressing need to begin the endless cycle of tasks that defines your existence. And for you, that means turning your attention to the ever-present demands of textile production. The quiet hum of the longhouse is the sound of a community already hard at work, and your loom, standing expectantly in its designated corner, awaits your touch. With the morning meal concluded and the basic household chores attended to, your focus shifts to the very beginning of your craft, transforming a greasy, matted fleece into usable fiber. Today, perhaps, a new batch of wool has arrived from the spring shearing, or it's been pulled from sheep that were culled for meat. It's not the clean, carded rovings a modern crafter might buy. This is raw, unprocessed wool, straight off the sheep's back, complete with dirt, twigs, lanolin, the natural grease in wool, and occasionally less savory additions like burrs or even dried dung. Your first task is the laborious process of cleaning and preparing these fibers, a critical step often glossed over in romanticized depictions of weaving. You spread the fleece out, perhaps on a clean patch of ground outside the longhouse, if the weather permits, or on a designated area of the floor within. The smell is strong, an earthy animal scent that clings to your clothes and hands. Your fingers, already calloused from years of such work, begin the painstaking task of picking through the wool, removing the larger pieces of debris. This is slow, meticulous work. A tiny thorn or a sharp piece of grit left in the wool can break a delicate thread later in the spinning process, or worse, snag and tear the fabric on the loom. You might use a simple wooden stick or your bare hands to tease apart the matted clumps. Once the grossest impurities are removed, the wool might need washing, though this is a point of some debate among textile historians. Some argue that Vikings often spun their wool in the grease, as the natural lanolin made it easier to spin and added a degree of water resistance to the final fabric. Others suggest at least a light washing in cold or lukewarm water, perhaps with a bit of stale urine, a common ancient detergent due to its ammonia content, or wood ash lye to help break down the grease. If you are washing it, imagine the scene: lugging heavy buckets of water, working with cold, wet, and increasingly smelly wool, your hands becoming chapped and sore from the constant immersion and the harshness of the cleaning agents. This isn't a gentle spa treatment for fibers. It's hard physical labor. After picking and possibly washing comes carding or combing. For finer wools, you might use a pair of hand cards, wooden paddles with wired teeth, to align the fibers, removing smaller tangles and creating a soft, airy roll of wool called a rowlogs. For longer, coarser wools, you might use wool combs, which look like miniature iron rakes, to draw out the fibers into a smooth, continuous sliver called a top. Both processes require strength and a practiced rhythm. You're essentially teasing and taming a chaotic mass of individual fibers into a state of orderly preparation for spinning. A poorly carded or combed fleece will result in lumpy, uneven yarn, which in turn will create a weak and unattractive fabric. The quality of your final product, be it a simple work tunic or a finely patterned cloak, depends heavily on this unglamorous foundational stage. The gory details here are subtle but persistent. The constant exposure to dirt and lanolin can lead to skin irritations or minor infections in any small cuts on your hands. The repetitive motions can cause strain in your wrists and shoulders. One quirky tidbit: the Vikings kept several types of sheep, including the northern European short-tailed sheep, whose wool came in a variety of natural colors: white, gray, brown, black. This meant you could create patterned textiles without always resorting to dyeing, a small mercy in an otherwise laborious process. But even with this natural palette, the demand for vibrant color was strong, and that would lead to yet another demanding and sometimes hazardous stage, which we'll explore later. For now, the pile of cleaned and carded wool grows slowly, each soft cloud of fiber a testament to hours of your patient, uncomplaining toil. The sun, your only reliable timepiece, has climbed higher, casting slightly more light through the smoke hole of the longhouse, though slightly is the operative word. The air remains hazy. You've spent a good portion of your morning transforming a matted, dirty fleece into soft, fluffy rolags or slivers of combed wool. Now, with a sigh that is part weariness, part anticipation, you pick up your spindle and a distaff, if you're using one for longer fibers, and begin the crucial, almost meditative process of spinning. This is where individual fibers are twisted together to create a continuous thread, the yarn that will eventually become fabric. In an age before spinning, wheels reached Scandinavia. The spinning wheel arrived much later, around the 13th to 14th century. All yarn was produced using a hand spindle and whirl. Imagine yourself seated on a low stool, or perhaps even on the floor, a bundle of prepared wool tucked into your belt, or held on a forked stick, the distaff. You draw out a small amount of fiber, deftly teasing it with your fingers to the desired thickness, and attach it to the simple wooden spindle, essentially a weighted stick. The weight or whirl, often made of stone, bone, pottery, or amber, provides the momentum. With a practiced flick of your wrist, or by rolling the spindle against your thigh, you set it spinning like a top. As it spins, it twists the drafted fibers together, creating yarn. You control the thickness and evenness of the yarn with the skill of your drafting hand, feeding more fibers into the twist as the spindle descends towards the floor. Once a length of yarn is spun, you wind it onto the shaft of the spindle and repeat the process over and over for hours on end. It sounds simple, almost idyllic, but the reality is far more demanding. The skill lies in producing a consistent yarn. Too thin, and it will break under the tension of the loom. Too thick, and the fabric will be coarse and uneven. Too much twist, and the yarn becomes hard and unyielding. Too little, and it will pull apart. You, as an experienced weaver, can produce an astonishing variety of yarns, from fine, delicate threads for intricate patterns, to strong, robust yarns for everyday tunics, or even the heavy sailcloth that powers a Viking longship. This isn't just muscle memory, it's a deep, intuitive understanding of your materials, a feel for the fibers that comes only with years of practice. One of the subtle, medical hardships of this process is the repetitive strain on your fingers, wrists, and shoulders. Carpal tunnel syndrome, or something very much like it, would have been a common affliction for dedicated spinners, though they would have had no name for it, only the persistent ache and numbness. The sheer amount of yarn required for even a simple garment was prodigious. Historians and experimental archaeologists estimate that it could take many tens, if not hundreds, of hours of spinning to produce enough yarn for a single tunic. And a Viking household needed many tunics, cloaks, blankets, and other textiles. Thus, spinning was not an occasional task. It was a constant, near-perpetual activity for many women in the community. You might spin while supervising children, while chatting with other women, even while walking. The spindle and whirl were ubiquitous, essential tools of female industry. A quirky tidbit: spindle whorls are one of the most common archaeological finds at Viking sites, a testament to the vast scale of textile production. They come in various sizes and materials, some plain, others decorated, perhaps reflecting the status or personal preference of the owner. The scholarly debate often revolves around the efficiency of hand spinning and the division of labor. Was spinning solely women's work, or did men and children also contribute, especially for coarser yarns? While predominantly female, it's plausible others assisted, but the fine, high-quality yarn needed for good cloth was likely the domain of skilled women like yourself. As you spin, the pile of finished yarn grows slowly, a tangible result of your patient labor. Each length of thread represents not just time, but a quiet defiance against the harshness of your world, a transformation of raw nature into something of use, something of beauty, something essential for survival. The only sound is the soft whir of the spindle, a gentle counterpoint to the crackling fire and the muted sounds of life within the longhouse, a rhythm of creation in a world often defined by struggle. Your pile of freshly spun yarn, a testament to hours of patient labor, lies ready. While some of it might be used in its natural undyed state, the creamy whites, earthy browns, and somber grays of the sheep's fleece offering their own subtle beauty. The Viking world, contrary to some drab modern depictions, often craved color. Rich reds, vibrant blues, sunny yellows, and deep greens adorned their clothing and tapestries, a splash of brilliance against the often muted tones of their landscape. And so, your next task, or perhaps one you've been preparing for concurrently, is dyeing. This is where your alchemical knowledge of plants, minerals, and sometimes rather surprising ingredients comes into play. Imagine your workspace, perhaps a dedicated area outdoors if the weather is fine, or a smoky corner of the longhouse if not. Large pottery or soapstone cauldrons bubble over a carefully tended fire. The air is thick with strange, often pungent aromas, some earthy and pleasant, others less so. You are, in essence, a practical chemist, coaxing color from the natural world. The most prized red dye, for example, often came from the root of the madder plant. You would have to dig up the roots, clean them, crush them, and then carefully control the temperature and pH of the dye bath to achieve the desired vibrant hue. It's a process that could take days, requiring constant attention. Yellows might come from weld, dyer's broom, or even onion skins. Greens were often achieved by first dyeing yellow and then over-dyeing with blue, typically from woad. Woad, Isatis tinctoria, is a particularly interesting case, producing a beautiful indigo-like blue. However, the extraction process was notoriously smelly and labor-intensive. The leaves had to be harvested, crushed, and fermented, a process that, according to some historical sources, involved the use of stale urine as an ammonia source to aid fermentation and help the dye fix to the wool. You can imagine the less than fragrant atmosphere around the woad vat. This is one of those gory, or at least gross details of daily life that is often conveniently overlooked. The scholarly debate continues on the exact methods and prevalence of urine use in Viking dyeing, but it's a documented practice in many ancient dyeing traditions for achieving certain colors. Your modern sensibilities might recoil, but for a Viking weaver seeking that coveted blue, it was a necessary, if unpleasant, part of the craft. Beyond plants, other sources were used. Some lichens could produce a range of colors, from yellows and browns to purples, known as crottle, in later periods in Scotland and Ireland. The kermes insect, a tiny scale insect found on oak trees, could yield a brilliant crimson, though it was a luxury dye, likely reserved for the wealthy. Each dye source required its own specific recipe, its own understanding of mordants. Substances like alum, potassium aluminum sulfate, sometimes found naturally or traded, iron salts from rusty water, or tannins from oak galls or bark, which help the dye bind to the fibers and improve its fastness. Without a mordant, many natural dyes would simply wash out or fade quickly. Finding and preparing these mordants was another layer of specialized knowledge. The dyeing process itself is hot, steamy work. You're lifting heavy skeins of wet yarn in and out of bubbling cauldrons, your hands constantly stained with the colors you're creating. There's a risk of burns from the fire or the hot liquids, and some plant materials or mordants could be irritants to the skin or lungs. This is where medical hardship could arise, a nasty burn that festers, or a chronic cough from inhaling fumes in an enclosed space. You monitor the dye baths with a practiced eye, knowing that a few degrees too hot or a few minutes too long can ruin a batch of precious yarn. One quirky tidbit: the Vikings' bees were sophisticated enough to achieve a wide range of shades and hues by varying dye concentration, mordants, and dyeing times, indicating a deep empirical understanding of chemistry. As you pull a dripping skein of vibrant blue or rich red yarn from the pot, there's a moment of satisfaction. You've transformed humble wool not just into thread, but into a splash of defiant color, ready to bring warmth and beauty to a challenging world. The dyed yarns, now dry and vibrant, hang in colorful skeins around your workspace in the longhouse, a testament to your alchemical skills. The next monumental task, the one that truly defines you as a weaver, is to set up your loom and begin the actual process of creating fabric. In the Viking Age, the dominant tool for this was the warp-weighted loom, a large, upright frame that, while capable of producing beautiful and complex textiles, was also a physically demanding instrument requiring considerable strength, patience, and skill. Imagine this loom. It's not a compact, horizontal affair like many modern looms. It consists of two upright posts, often leaning against a wall of the longhouse for stability, connected at the top by a horizontal beam called the cloth beam. The warp threads, the lengthwise threads of the fabric, are tied to this top beam and hang down vertically. Instead of being secured at the bottom, these warp threads are grouped together and tied to heavy weights, typically made of stone. Soapstone was common, or fired clay. These loom weights, dozens of them, sometimes hundreds for a wide piece of cloth, hang freely, providing the necessary tension on the warp threads. This is where the warp-weighted name comes from. Setting up or dressing this loom is a significant undertaking in itself. First, you must calculate the required number and length of warp threads for the piece of fabric you intend to weave. A tunic, a cloak, a blanket, or perhaps even a section of a sail. This involves careful planning and precise measurement. Then comes the laborious process of winding these warp threads onto the cloth beam, ensuring they are evenly spaced and under consistent tension. This often requires two people. Once the warp is on the beam, you meticulously group the threads and attach the loom weights. Each weight must be of a similar mass to ensure even tension across the width of the fabric. Otherwise, the final cloth will be distorted. You can already feel the strain in your back and arms as you lift and secure these heavy weights. Perhaps dozens of them, each weighing a pound or more. The sheer size of a warp-weighted loom is also a factor. It could be several feet wide and taller than a person, dominating a significant portion of your living space. In the already cramped and smoky longhouse, finding adequate space and light to work would have been a constant challenge. One of the ongoing medical hardships associated with this loom is the posture it forces upon the weaver. You primarily work standing up, or perhaps on a low stool for short periods, constantly reaching up to manipulate the threads and beat down the weft. This leads to chronic strain on the back, shoulders, neck, and legs. Skeletal analyses of Viking women sometimes show wear patterns consistent with such repetitive, strenuous activity. A quirky tidbit about warp-weighted looms is that, unlike many other loom types where the cloth is woven from the bottom up, on a warp-weighted loom, you weave from the top down. As you weave, the finished cloth is wound up onto the top beam. This means you are constantly working at or above chest height. The process of creating the shed, the opening between alternating warp threads through which you pass the weft thread, is done manually, often using heddle rods. These rods are attached to sets of warp threads, and by lifting them, you create the space to pass your shuttle or bobbin of weft yarn. It's a slower, more deliberate process than on more modern looms, demanding constant attention and physical effort. The rhythmic thud of your weaving sword, a flat sword-like piece of wood or bone used to beat each new weft thread tightly into place, becomes one of the defining sounds of your day. This isn't gentle tapping. It's a firm, forceful action necessary to create a dense, durable fabric capable of withstanding the rigors of Viking life. Setting up the loom is a victory in itself, a framework for creation established through sweat and precision. Now, the true artistry and the real endurance test can begin. The warp-weighted loom stands ready, a formidable array of taut threads and heavy stones, filling your corner of the longhouse. The air is still hazy with smoke from the central hearth, and the light filtering in from the smoke hole, and perhaps a few small animal skin-covered openings in the wall is meager at best. This is the environment in which you, a Viking weaver, will spend countless hours, your skill and patience transforming simple yarn into functional, beautiful, and sometimes incredibly complex textiles. You begin at the top of the loom, your shuttle, a simple wooden stick, or a more refined boat-shaped tool holding your weft yarn, flying from one hand to the other as you pass it through a shed, the opening created by manipulating the heddle rods. After each pass of the weft, you pick up your weaving sword, or beater, a heavy, flat implement made of wood, bone, or whalebone, and with a series of firm, rhythmic thuds, you beat the new weft thread tightly down against the previously woven cloth. This action is crucial for creating a dense, weather-resistant fabric. It also requires considerable upper body strength and contributes to the physical toll of your craft. Imagine doing this thousands upon thousands of times for a single large garment. If you're weaving a simple tabby, plain weave, the process is relatively straightforward, though still demanding. But the Vikings were masters of more complex patterns. You might be creating a twill with its characteristic diagonal lines, or a herringbone, a diamond pattern, or even more intricate geometric designs. These patterns aren't just for show. Different weaves have different properties of strength, drape, and warmth. To create these patterns, you must meticulously select and lift different combinations of warp threads with your heddle rods for each pass of the weft. This requires intense concentration and a deep understanding of weave structures. A single mistake, a miscounted thread, can ruin the pattern and necessitate painstakingly unweaving a section, a frustrating setback. The dim, flickering light of the longhouse is a constant challenge. Your eyes strain to distinguish individual threads, to follow the intricate patterns, to ensure the edges of your cloth, the selvages, are neat and even. Headaches and eye fatigue are your frequent companions. Some scholars speculate that Viking weavers developed exceptional visual acuity or simply learned to work by feel as much as by sight in these poorly lit conditions. The medical hardship here is the slow, cumulative damage to your eyesight and the chronic tension headaches that likely plagued you. You might occasionally step outside for a moment, blinking in the brighter, though often overcast, daylight, to rest your eyes before returning to the shadowy loom. One quirky tidbit is the discovery of small, beautifully decorated weaving swords and spindle whorls in female graves, suggesting these were not just utilitarian tools, but also treasured personal possessions, perhaps even symbols of a woman's skill and status. Some intricate Viking textiles that have survived, like fragments from the Oseberg ship burial, show an astonishing level of artistry, with complex patterns, multiple colors, and even tablet woven bands incorporated as borders. Producing such work in the conditions you face would require not just skill, but an almost obsessive dedication. The scholarly debate often centers on how these complex patterns were memorized and transmitted. Were there pattern drafts, or was it all passed down orally and through demonstration from mother to daughter, master to apprentice? The latter seems more likely for much of the period. You carry these patterns in your head, a library of designs built up over years of practice. As you weave, you are not just creating cloth, you are participating in a living tradition, encoding cultural symbols and ancient motifs into the very fabric of your community's life. The hours pass, marked only by the changing quality of light and the slow, steady growth of the cloth beneath your hands. It's a testament to your endurance, this quiet creation in the heart of the noisy, smoky longhouse, the repetitive motions of spinning day after day, the long hours spent standing at the warp-weighted loom, the strain of beating down the weft with a heavy weaving sword. All these take their toll on your body. You, the Viking weaver, are no stranger to aches and pains. Your lower back probably throbs with a dull, persistent ache. Your shoulders and neck are often stiff and sore. Your wrists and fingers might tingle or feel numb after hours of manipulating fine threads or gripping the spindle. These aren't acute battle wounds, but the chronic, grinding, medical hardships of a life dedicated to intensive manual labor. What did you do for these everyday ailments in an era devoid of modern analgesics, anti-inflammatory drugs, or physical therapy? You relied on folk medicine, a combination of herbal remedies, simple physical treatments, and perhaps a dose of superstition or appeals to the gods. If your back was particularly troublesome, another woman in the household might rub it with animal fat infused with certain herbs, known for their warming or soothing properties. Perhaps juniper, or even something as simple as heated birch leaves. A poultice of crushed dock leaves or plantain might be applied to a swollen joint, or a minor skin irritation caused by rough wool or caustic dyes. For headaches brought on by eye strain and the smoky longhouse air, you might press a cool, damp cloth to your forehead, or brew a tea from willow bark, which contains salicin, a natural precursor to aspirin, though the dosage and efficacy would have been highly variable. The scholarly debate among archaeologists and paleopathologists often involves examining skeletal remains from the Viking Age for evidence of work-related stress and disease. Degenerative joint disease, particularly in the spine, shoulders, and hands, is sometimes observed in female skeletons, potentially linking these conditions to activities like weaving or grinding grain. Of course, it's hard to be certain, but it paints a picture of a life where chronic pain was a common companion. You wouldn't have a doctor to diagnose repetitive strain injury or osteoarthritis. You would simply endure, perhaps with a stoic acceptance common to people of that era. One quirky, or rather practical aspect of Viking healthcare was the emphasis on hygiene where possible. Saunas or bad stew were known, and while perhaps not a daily ritual, regular steam bathing could have helped soothe aching muscles and cleanse the skin. However, for acute injuries like a deep cut from a dropped tool or a burn from the dye pot, the risks were much higher. Without antiseptics, infection was a constant threat. A minor wound could easily become a festering, life-threatening problem. Poultices of honey, known for its antibacterial properties even then, if available and not all consumed as a precious sweetener, or certain mosses, like sphagnum moss, which is highly absorbent and has some antiseptic qualities, might be applied, but their effectiveness was limited against severe infections. You might also turn to charms or amulets for protection against illness or to aid healing, reflecting the blend of practical and magical thinking common in the Viking Age. Perhaps a small Thor's hammer amulet worn around your neck was thought to offer general protection, or specific incantations were whispered over a painful joint. This wasn't necessarily a replacement for practical remedies, but often a supplement to them, a way of appealing to all possible sources of aid in a world where true medical understanding was scarce. For you, the weaver, managing your physical well-being was crucial. Your ability to work directly impacted your family's survival and comfort. So, you would use whatever knowledge and resources were available, however limited they might seem to us now, to keep your hands moving, your loom productive, and your body, as much as possible, free from debilitating pain. The sun has reached its zenith, or at least you guess it has by the subtle shift in the quality of light filtering through the smoke hole. It's time for a brief respite from your labor, a chance to rest your aching back and weary eyes, and to take the midday meal. There are no set lunch breaks in your world, no union rules mandating rest periods. You work when there is work to be done and light to do it by, and you rest when your body demands it, or when communal activities like meals dictate a pause. You step away from your loom, the silence in its absence almost palpable after hours of rhythmic clacking and thudding. The central hearth of the longhouse is a hub of activity. Perhaps one of the older women, or a younger girl not yet skilled enough for the loom, has been tending the fire and preparing the midday meal. It's unlikely to be an elaborate affair. Viking age diets, especially for common folk, were based on what could be grown, hunted, fished, or foraged locally. You might have a thick porridge of barley or oats, perhaps supplemented with some wild greens or root vegetables like turnips if they are in season. A piece of dense, dark flatbread, possibly made from rye or a mix of grains, is a staple. If the family is fortunate, there might be some skyr, a type of thick yogurt, cheese, or even a bit of dried or smoked fish or meat from the household stores. Fresh meat was more of a rarity, reserved for feasts or special occasions, or when an animal was newly slaughtered. You gather with other members of your household, your children, perhaps your husband, if he's not away hunting, farming, or on a voyage, other women who share the longhouse and its endless round of chores. The seating is informal, likely low stools, benches, or even just furs spread on the floor around the fire. This meal is not just about sustenance. It's a crucial point of social connection. News from the wider settlement might be shared. Who has returned from a trading trip, whose cow has calved? What whispers have come from the chieftain's hall? You might discuss the progress of your weaving, the quality of the latest batch of wool, or the need for more yarn of a particular color. Other women might share their own concerns, a sick child, a dwindling supply of firewood, the mending that needs to be done. One quirky tidbit of Viking-age domestic life is the role of storytelling. While you eat, or perhaps in the evenings as you continue with lighter tasks like mending or spinning, someone might recount an old saga, a tale of gods and heroes, or a more recent local event. This oral tradition was vital for entertainment, for education, and for passing on cultural values and history. You listen, perhaps adding a comment or a laugh, the shared stories weaving another kind of thread, one that binds your small community together. There's also a constant undercurrent of practicality. The pressure to be productive is immense. Even as you rest, your mind might be on the fabric still on the loom, the amount of yarn left to spin, the coming change of seasons, and the clothing that will be needed. There's a scholarly debate about the exact nature of leisure in the Viking Age. Was there truly time for idleness, or was every moment filled with some form of productive activity, even if it was social grooming or mending tools? For women like you, whose work was so central to the household economy, true leisure was likely a rare luxury. This midday pause is less about relaxation and more about refueling for the second half of a long and demanding day. As the meal ends and the last crumbs of flatbread are consumed, you feel the familiar pull of your duties. The loom awaits, its silent threads a constant reminder of the work yet to be done. The brief interlude of food and fellowship is over, and it's time to return to the rhythmic labor that defines your quiet, essential life. Not all the fabric you weave, you, the skilled Viking artisan, is destined for simple tunics or warm blankets. Some of your most demanding and crucial work involves producing the very sinews of Viking power and mobility, the great woolen sails for their iconic longships. While the image of a Viking warrior with axe and shield is potent, without your sails, those warriors would be severely limited. Their famous voyages of trade, exploration, and raiding rendered far less effective, if not impossible. This isn't just cloth making. It's contributing directly to the reach and influence of your people. Imagine the scale of the task. A sail for a typical ocean-going longship could be enormous, perhaps 10 to 12 meters wide and nearly as high, requiring a vast amount of woolen fabric. Some estimates suggest over 100 square meters of cloth. woven from the fleece of perhaps 200 sheep and demanding thousands of hours of labor, from shearing to spinning to the final weaving. This is not a solo endeavor. Producing a sail would be a communal effort involving many women in the settlement, each contributing their skill and labor over many months, possibly even a year or two. You might be responsible for weaving a specific section, ensuring its strength and weave density meet the exacting standards required for a sail that must withstand the brutal winds and storms of the North Atlantic. The yarn used for sails needed to be exceptionally strong and tightly spun, often from the coarser, longer wool of specific sheep breeds. It also needed to be heavily processed with lanolin, the natural wool grease, to make it as water-resistant as possible. A wet sail becomes incredibly heavy and inefficient. You and the other weavers would employ a dense tabby or twill weave to create a fabric that is both strong and relatively lightweight for its size. The sheer physical effort of weaving such large, heavy sections of cloth on a warp-weighted loom would be immense. You'd be working with thick, robust yarns, beating them down with significant force to ensure the weave is tight and windproof. The strain on your back, shoulders, and arms would be even greater than with finer domestic textiles. Once the individual panels of the sail are woven, they must be painstakingly stitched together, likely using stronger linen or hemp thread, or even thin leather thongs. Reinforcements, such as leather patches or braided ropes along the edges, the bolt ropes, would be added to distribute stress and prevent tearing. This finishing work is as crucial as the weaving itself. A poorly stitched or inadequately reinforced sail could rip apart in a gale, with potentially disastrous consequences for the ship and its crew. There's a heavy responsibility resting on your shoulders and those of your fellow craftswomen. The lives of your husbands, sons, and kinsmen literally depend on the quality of your work. A quirky, or rather, deeply significant aspect of these sails is their potential for decoration. While functionality was paramount, some sagas and archaeological finds, like the Oseberg tapestry, though not a sail, suggest that important sails might have been dyed in bold colors, or even adorned with sewn-on patterns or symbols, perhaps to denote the chieftain or the ship's home port, or to invoke the favor of the gods. The scholarly debate continues on how common such decoration was, but the possibility adds another layer to your craft. You are not just a producer of utilitarian goods. You are a creator of symbols of power and identity. As you stand back and look at a completed sail, a vast expanse of carefully woven wool, ready to catch the wind and carry a longship to unknown shores, there must be a profound sense of pride, mixed with a quiet anxiety for those who will venture out beneath it. Your quiet life is inextricably linked to the loud, adventurous, and often dangerous lives of the Viking seafarers. Life in the Viking Age, even for a skilled weaver like yourself, is a constant negotiation with scarcity. While your farmstead might be relatively prosperous in good years, there are always times when resources run thin. A harsh winter, a poor growing season for flax or dye plants, disease decimating the sheep flocks. Any of these can dramatically impact your ability to produce the textiles your family and community depend on. Your ingenuity and resourcefulness are tested not just in the creation of new cloth, but in the careful management and preservation of existing materials. Imagine a year when the wool shear is meager. The sheep are thin, their fleeces sparse and of poor quality. You meticulously collect every scrap, knowing that nothing can be wasted. Or perhaps the flax harvest has failed, meaning the strong linen threads needed for durable clothing, sail repairs, or fishing nets are in short supply. In such times, your skills in mending, patching, and repurposing become even more critical than your ability to weave new fabric from scratch. A worn-out tunic isn't simply discarded. It's a precious source of reusable material. You'll carefully unpick its seams, salvaging any sections of still usable cloth. Smaller pieces might be cut into patches to repair other garments. Threads from unraveling fabric can be respun and reused. Nothing is thrown away if it can possibly be given a new life. This make do and mend philosophy is a cornerstone of your existence. You become an expert at identifying the weak points in a garment before they become irreparable holes. A child's tunic, outgrown, might be cleverly recut and resewn to fit a younger sibling, or its fabric incorporated into a quilt or a smaller bag. Even the smallest scraps of wool or linen have value. They can be used for stuffing, for creating decorative applique, or even shredded and respun with new fibers to create a coarser, but still useful, yarn. The scholarly debate often touches on the extent of textile recycling in the Viking Age, but archaeological finds of patched and repaired garments suggest it was a common and necessary practice. You are, in essence, a master of textile conservation. The pressure to provide for the coming winter is a constant undercurrent to your work. As autumn approaches and the days grow shorter, you assess your family's wardrobe. Are there enough warm cloaks and tunics? Are the blankets in good repair? A hole in a cloak or a threadbare patch on a blanket can mean the difference between relative comfort and severe suffering, or even frostbite during the brutal Scandinavian winter. Your needle, as much as your shuttle, is a tool of survival. The medical hardship here is indirect but very real. Inadequate clothing leads to increased vulnerability to cold-related illnesses like pneumonia or severe chilblains. Your careful mending and provisioning are a form of preventative medicine for your entire household. One quirky tidbit is the potential use of less common fibers when wool or flax were scarce. Nettle fibers, for instance, can be processed to create a surprisingly fine and strong linen-like thread, though the process of harvesting and retting stinging nettles is, as you can imagine, an unpleasant task in itself. There's also evidence of hair from other animals, like goat or even deer, being spun and woven, particularly for coarser utility fabrics. Your resourcefulness extends to exploring every possible avenue to meet your textile needs. This constant battle against scarcity, this need to be endlessly inventive with limited resources, is a hallmark of your quiet endurance. It's a daily grind that lacks the drama of a raid, but it is, in its own way, a relentless fight for your family's well-being and survival in a world that offers few easy comforts. Your hands, though perhaps not wielding a sword, are certainly waging their own vital war against the forces of decay and deprivation. Your longhouse, the center of your family life and your weaving workshop, is a place of relative shelter, but it is by no means a sanctuary free from danger. The quiet life of a Viking weaver is punctuated by a host of everyday hazards and the ever-present threat of illness, all exacerbated by the living conditions of the era. These aren't the dramatic perils of a sea voyage or a shield wall, but the more insidious, mundane threats that can be just as deadly. The central hearth, essential for warmth, cooking, and light, is also a constant fire hazard. Imagine the scene: an open fire pit, often burning year-round, in a structure built primarily of wood. with a roof likely thatched with straw or turf. Sparks can easily fly, igniting dry bedding or stray fibers from your weaving. Children playing too close, or a moment of carelessness while cooking, could lead to a devastating conflagration. Burns, from minor scalds to severe life-threatening injuries, would have been a common domestic accident, and your medical kit for treating such burns is pitifully inadequate. Perhaps some animal fat or a poultice of mashed leaves, offering little protection against infection or scarring. The dim lighting within the longhouse, a consequence of few or no windows and the ever-present smoke, creates its own set of dangers. Tripping over unseen objects, stumbling on uneven floors, or misjudging a step could lead to sprains, fractures, or other injuries. Tools, whether for farming, woodworking, or your own weaving craft, like sharp knives for cutting thread or heavy loom weights, if misplaced or handled carelessly in the gloom, could cause nasty wounds. Again, with no effective antiseptics or understanding of germ theory, even a seemingly minor cut could become infected, leading to fever, sepsis, and death. The scholarly debate often considers the average life expectancy in the Viking Age. It was significantly lower than today, not just due to violence, but due to these everyday risks and the high rates of infant and childhood mortality. Then there's the issue of disease. The longhouse, while providing communal warmth, is also a perfect breeding ground for airborne and contagious illnesses. You live in close quarters with numerous family members, and possibly even some livestock during winter. Ventilation is poor. A cough or a sneeze from one person can quickly spread through the entire household. Common ailments like influenza, pneumonia, or tuberculosis would have been devastating, with little to offer in terms of treatment beyond rest, warmth, if achievable, and herbal concoctions of dubious efficacy. Dysentery and other gastrointestinal illnesses spread through contaminated food or water, especially if the well is poorly sited or sanitation around the homestead is lacking, would also have been a frequent and debilitating scourge. Your role as a woman often extends to being the primary caregiver for the sick and injured in your household. You draw upon a traditional knowledge of herbs and folk remedies passed down through generations. Some of these might have had genuine, if limited, palliative effects. Willow bark for fever, chamomile for calming, sphagnum moss for dressing wounds. But many were likely ineffective or based on superstition. You watch helplessly as a child succumbs to a fever, or an elderly relative wastes away from a lung ailment, your medical interventions doing little to alter the grim outcome. One quirky, though sad, tidbit is the archaeological evidence of individuals with severe disabilities or chronic illnesses who were clearly cared for by their communities for extended periods, suggesting a degree of compassion and social support even amidst the harshness. However, this care was palliative, not curative. The ever-present threat of sickness and accidental injury casts a long shadow over your quiet life, a constant reminder of the fragility of existence in a world where a simple infection or a bad fall could have fatal consequences. Though your days as a Viking weaver are consumed by the relentless demands of your craft and household chores, you are not an isolated drudge. You are part of a community, and your skills, particularly the textiles you produce, play a significant role in the social and economic fabric of that community. The cloth you weave is more than just utilitarian. It's a form of currency, a status symbol, and a means by which you, as a woman, can exert a degree of influence and achieve a measure of economic independence, however limited. Imagine market days in your settlement, or perhaps a larger regional gathering if one is accessible. While your husband or other men might be trading furs, iron tools, or amber, you too have goods to offer. Finely woven woolen cloth, especially if dyed in vibrant, sought-after colors, or patterned with intricate designs, is a valuable commodity. You might trade a length of your best fabric for pottery from a neighboring village, for salt, a precious and essential preservative, for glass beads brought by traders from distant lands, or even for silver coins or hack silver, chopped up pieces of silver jewelry or ornaments used as currency. This isn't just barter for household necessities. It's participation in a wider economic network. The quality of your weaving directly impacts your family's ability to acquire goods they cannot produce themselves. Your skill as a weaver also contributes to your social standing within the community. A woman known for producing exceptionally fine or durable textiles would command respect. Her work might be sought after by the chieftain's family for prestigious garments or tapestries to adorn the long hall, bringing honor and perhaps material reward to her own household. The saga occasionally mention valuable textiles being given as gifts between high-status individuals, underscoring their role in social diplomacy and alliance building. You, as the creator of such items, are an integral part of this system of exchange and prestige, even if your name isn't sung by skalds in the mead hall. The scholarly debate often revolves around the extent of women's economic power and autonomy in the Viking Age. While it was undeniably a patriarchal society, the evidence suggests that women, particularly those who managed farmsteads while their husbands were away, a common occurrence, or those with valuable craft skills like weaving, could wield considerable authority within their sphere. They were responsible for managing household resources, including the production and distribution of textiles. Some historians argue that the keys to the longhouse, often found in female graves and symbolizing the mistress's authority, represented significant control over the domestic economy. Your ability to produce surplus cloth for trade would certainly enhance that authority. One quirky tidbit is the Frisian cloth, Pallium frisonicum, a type of high-quality woolen textile produced in Frisia, modern-day Netherlands and northern Germany, that was widely traded throughout the Viking world and even appears as tribute payments in some historical records. While you might not be Frisian, the existence of such a renowned trade textile highlights the economic importance of well-made cloth. Perhaps your own local weave has a particular reputation for quality or a unique pattern that traders seek out. Your loom is not just a tool for clothing your family. It's a means of production that connects you to a wider world of commerce and social interaction. Your quiet life has ripples that extend far beyond the walls of your longhouse, woven into the very warp and weft of Viking Age society, as the vibrant greens and golds of the fleeting Scandinavian summer give way to the russets and browns of autumn, and then inevitably to the long, dark, and bitterly cold months of winter. The rhythm of your life as a Viking weaver shifts, but the work itself rarely ceases. The fields may lie fallow under a blanket of snow, and the longships may be pulled ashore, but inside the smoky confines of the longhouse, your loom remains a focal point of activity, your hands rarely idle. Imagine the scene. Outside, a blizzard rages, the wind howling like a hungry wolf, piling snowdrifts high against the turf-covered walls of your dwelling. Inside, the central hearth is kept blazing, a precious beacon of warmth and light in a world plunged into near-perpetual twilight. The air is thick with smoke, more so than usual, as the smoke hole in the roof might be partially covered to keep out the worst of the snow and wind. It's in this dim, flickering, fire-lit atmosphere that you continue your weaving. Your eyes, already accustomed to poor light, strain even more to distinguish the fine threads and intricate patterns. The cold is a constant enemy, seeping in through any crack or crevice, making your fingers stiff and less nimble. You huddle closer to the fire when you can, but its warmth doesn't reach every corner of the long, drafty longhouse. This is where the medical hardship of respiratory ailments could be exacerbated, the combination of cold air and concentrated smoke being particularly harsh on the lungs. Winter is a time for indoor work, and textile production is paramount. This is when you and the other women of the household might focus on producing the heaviest, warmest woolen garments, thick cloaks, multi-layered tunics, sturdy blankets, essential for surviving the sub-zero temperatures. The demand for warm clothing is unending. You might also work on more decorative pieces, perhaps a tapestry to brighten the otherwise gloomy walls of the longhouse, or a finely patterned band to adorn a special garment. The slower pace of outdoor life during winter, no farming, limited travel, might paradoxically allow for more focused time at the loom, provided you have enough prepared yarn and your health holds. But winter is also a time of increased social cohesion within the longhouse. With everyone confined indoors for extended periods, storytelling, music, and games become even more important. You might weave while listening to an elder recount ancient sagas, the epic tales of gods, giants, and heroes, providing a dramatic counterpoint to the rhythmic monotony of your work. Children huddled nearby might listen wide-eyed, or perhaps play quiet games, their laughter a brief spark in the smoky dimness. The sagas themselves are full of references to textiles, magical cloaks, richly embroidered banners, sails woven with spells. These stories underscore the cultural significance of your craft. One quirky tidbit: some scholars suggest that the intricate, abstract patterns found in Viking art and textiles may have been influenced by the visual effects of flickering firelight and the long hours spent in dimly lit indoor environments, where the mind might be more prone to seeing patterns in shadows. The scholarly debate sometimes considers whether winter was a time of relative rest or increased indoor labor for women, while the men might have more downtime when not hunting or ice fishing. For women, the domestic and craft-based workload likely remained substantial, keeping the fire going, preparing food from dwindling winter stores, caring for children, mending, spinning, and weaving. The tasks were endless. Your endurance is tested not by a single dramatic event, but by the slow, grinding persistence required to make it through the long, dark months, ensuring your family is warm, clothed, and fed. Each pass of your shuttle in the firelight is a small act of defiance against the encroaching winter darkness, a thread of continuity in a frozen world. Your life as a Viking weaver, a constant rhythm of preparing fibers, spinning, dyeing, and weaving, is interwoven with another profound and demanding cycle, that of childbirth and childcare. In an era with no modern obstetrics, no prenatal vitamins, and no sterile delivery rooms. Bringing a new life into the world is a perilous undertaking, and for you, it's a responsibility that directly impacts your ability to perform your essential craft. The quiet life is frequently punctuated by the very real risks and immense labor of motherhood. Imagine yourself pregnant, still expected to carry out many of your daily chores, including hours spent standing at the warp-weighted loom. The physical strain of pregnancy, combined with the already demanding nature of your work, would be considerable. There's no concept of maternity leave. You work until you are physically unable, and you are expected to resume your duties as soon as possible after giving birth. Your family's survival depends on it. When the time comes, you likely give birth within the familiar, if not entirely hygienic, confines of the longhouse, attended by other women of your household, your mother, sisters, or experienced older women who act as informal midwives. Their knowledge is based on tradition and accumulated experience, not on medical science as we know it. The risks are terrifyingly high. Hemorrhage, infection, puerperal or childbed fever, obstructed labor. Any of these could mean death for you, your baby, or both. The scholarly debate around maternal and infant mortality rates in the Viking Age suggests they were tragically high. Surviving childbirth was a significant victory in itself, and if you and your baby do survive, the postpartum period is fraught with its own challenges. You are likely anemic from blood loss, exhausted, and still responsible for caring for a newborn in a smoky, drafty longhouse, all while your body tries to heal. The medical hardship is acute and deeply personal. There are no antibiotics for infection, no surgical interventions for complications. You rely on herbal remedies to staunch bleeding or ease pain, and on the care of your female relatives. One quirky, or rather culturally significant aspect is the naming and ritual acceptance of a newborn. A child wasn't considered fully a member of the family or community until the father formally acknowledged it and gave it a name, often in a small ceremony that might involve sprinkling with water, a practice that predates Christian baptism in Scandinavia. If a child was born severely deformed or deemed unlikely to survive, or if the family simply couldn't afford to feed another mouth, especially in times of famine, the grim practice of exposure, leaving the infant out in the wilderness to die, was a known, if perhaps increasingly rare occurrence, though its prevalence is heavily debated by historians. This highlights the brutal pragmatism that sometimes governs survival in a harsh world. Assuming your child is healthy and accepted, your workload as a weaver now has an added layer of complexity. You learn to spin with a baby strapped to your back or sleeping in a cradle nearby. You snatch moments at the loom while the infant naps, your attention divided, your body still recovering. Breastfeeding is, of course, the norm, providing vital nourishment and some immunity to your child, but it also places further demands on your own nutritional reserves. The endurance required is not just physical, but emotional and mental. You are weaving the future of your family, both literally in the cloth you create and figuratively in the children you raise, all within a context of constant labor and underlying peril. Your quiet life is a testament to a profound, multifaceted strength that encompasses both the creation of textiles and the creation and nurturing of life itself. Let's not romanticize the natural fibers and traditional methods of your Viking weaver's life too much. While there's a certain rustic charm to the idea from our modern, sanitized perspective, the daily reality involves a level of grittiness and a series of minor but persistent, gory details that are often overlooked. These aren't the dramatic wounds of battle, but the everyday discomforts and unhygienic aspects of working with raw, unprocessed materials in a relatively primitive environment. Consider the wool itself. Before it becomes a soft, clean yarn, it's a greasy, often filthy fleece, straight from a sheep that has spent its life outdoors. You handle this wool constantly. The lanolin, or wool grease, while beneficial for waterproofing the final fabric, coats your hands, making them perpetually sticky and attracting dirt. Embedded within the fleece are not just twigs and burrs, but potentially ticks, lice, or other parasites from the animal. While you'd meticulously pick these out, the initial handling carries a risk of bites or skin irritation. The medical hardship here is the potential for minor skin infections or allergic reactions, especially if you have small cuts or from the coarser wool fibers themselves. There are no latex gloves, no industrial soaps to easily remove the ingrained grease and grime at the end of the day. Then there's the dyeing process. We've touched on the potentially noxious fumes from some plant materials or mordants, and the infamous use of stale urine for achieving certain blues with wove. Imagine the stench, the unpleasantness of working with vats of fermenting urine, all to achieve a desired color. Some natural dyes also required handling substances that could be caustic or irritating. Your hands would be constantly stained, the colors of your craft seeping into your very skin, a visible marker of your profession. While some natural dyes are benign, others, or the mordants used with them, could cause rashes or other dermatological issues over time. Personal hygiene in the Viking Age, while perhaps better than in some other contemporaneous European cultures, the Vikings were known to bathe relatively regularly, often weekly, in saunas or bathhouses if available, was still a far cry from modern standards. In the smoky, crowded longhouse, with animals sometimes sharing living quarters, staying truly clean was a constant challenge. When you're working with dirty wool, messy dye stuffs, and open fires, and then also cooking, cleaning, and caring for children in the same limited space, a certain level of grime is inevitable. This lack of perfect sanitation, combined with an incomplete understanding of how diseases spread, meant that minor infections could easily take hold and become more serious. One quirky, though perhaps not entirely pleasant tidbit for a modern person to consider, is the very texture and feel of Viking Age clothing. Hand-spun, hand-woven wool, especially the coarser types used for everyday wear or work garments, would not have the softness of modern machine-processed merino or cashmere. It would be durable, yes, and warm when layered, but also likely quite scratchy against the skin, especially before it was broken in through wear and washing. You might wear a finer linen undertunic for comfort if you could afford it and had the time to make it, but for many, a degree of itchiness was just a part of daily life. The scholarly debate on Viking hygiene and comfort levels is ongoing, but it's safe to say that their tolerance for what we might consider discomfort was significantly higher. Your quiet life is embedded in a sensory world that is far more raw, odorous, and texturally challenging than our own. A constant, low-level endurance test against the elements and the very materials of your craft, in a society often defined in popular imagination by the overt strength and aggression of its male warriors, Your role as a Viking weaver, though quiet, demands a different but equally profound kind of fortitude. You are not wielding an axe in a shield wall, but your daily life is a testament to an incredible inner strength, resilience, and an astonishing capacity for endurance and adaptation. This isn't the explosive power of a berserker, but the sustained, relentless strength required to maintain a household, nurture a family, and produce essential goods in a harsh and unforgiving world. Consider the sheer physical stamina involved. Hours upon hours spent standing at the warp-weighted loom, the repetitive motions of spinning, the heavy lifting involved in preparing fleeces or moving loom weights. This is not light work. It builds a wiry strength, a toughness that is often underestimated. You manage this alongside the demands of childcare, food preparation, and all the other myriad tasks that keep a Viking farmstead functioning. There are no sick days, no paid vacation. If you fall ill, the work still needs to be done, or your family suffers. This relentless pressure cultivates a deep well of resilience. Then there's the mental and emotional endurance. You live with a constant awareness of the precariousness of life. Your husband, sons, or brothers might be away on dangerous sea voyages for months, even years, with no guarantee of their safe return. You face the sorrow of infant and child mortality, a tragically common experience in this era. You endure long, dark winters, confined for extended periods within the smoky longhouse. To navigate these challenges without succumbing to despair requires a powerful spirit. The sagas, while male-focused, occasionally offer glimpses of formidable women, shield maidens, wise matriarchs, women who take decisive action. While you might not be a legendary figure, you share in that underlying cultural expectation of female strength and competence. Your ability to adapt is also crucial. Resources are not always plentiful. You must be resourceful, making the most of what you have, finding ingenious solutions to everyday problems. A broken tool must be mended. A failed crop means finding alternative food sources. A shortage of wool necessitates creative repurposing of old textiles. This isn't just about physical labor. It's about a constant mental alertness, a practical intelligence owned by necessity. The scholarly debate often explores the agency of Viking women. Were they merely subservient, or did they wield considerable influence within their domestic and economic spheres? The evidence, from laws allowing women to inherit property and initiate divorce, to the clear economic importance of their craft production, suggests a more complex picture than simple subjugation. Your skills and your labor grant you a degree of status and influence, however informally. One quirky, yet telling detail is the Viking concept of frith, a complex idea encompassing peace, security, and strong community bonds. Maintaining frith within the household and the wider community was a vital responsibility, and women often played a key role as peace weavers, not just literally with thread, but metaphorically through diplomacy, hospitality, and the careful management of social relationships. Your quiet strength contributes significantly to the stability and cohesion of your society. You are not merely enduring hardship, you are actively shaping and sustaining the world around you through your labor, your resilience, and your often unseen emotional work. This is the quiet, formidable power of the Viking woman, a strength woven into the very fabric of her daily existence. After countless hours, days, perhaps even weeks of meticulous labor, the moment finally arrives. when the last weft thread is passed, the last row beaten firmly into place. You carefully cut the warp threads from the loom weight, and with a mixture of relief and satisfaction, you unroll the newly created fabric from the top beam. This is the culmination of your skill, your patience, and your physical endurance. A tangible product born from raw fiber and sheer determination. Imagine holding this piece of cloth in your hands. If it's a length of woolen vatmal, the sturdy, everyday fabric of the Viking Age, you feel its satisfying weight, its dense, slightly coarse texture. You run your fingers over the evenness of the weave, checking for any flaws, any missed threads. Perhaps it's a finer, softer piece, destined for an undertunic, or a brightly dyed segment that will become part of a patterned cloak. Or maybe it's a section of a great sail, incredibly tough and tightly woven, ready to withstand the fiercest ocean gales. Whatever its ultimate purpose, this fabric represents far more than just interconnected threads. It represents warmth against the biting cold, protection from the elements, a symbol of your family's status, or a vital component of your community's ability to travel and trade. There's a profound, almost primal satisfaction in this act of creation. In a world where so much is uncertain and beyond your control, the weather, disease, the success of a harvest or a voyage, the ability to transform raw, unpromising materials into something useful and beautiful is a source of immense personal agency and pride. You have literally woven order out of chaos, utility out of the wild. This isn't just a job. It's a craft, an art form, and a fundamental act of provision. The medical hardship you might have endured, the aching back, the strained eyes, the calloused hands, seems to fade slightly in the face of this accomplishment. The finished fabric still requires some processing. It might be washed and fulled, a process of beating or agitating the wet wool to make it shrink, felt, and become denser and more water-resistant. It might be further smoothed or pressed. Then comes the cutting and sewing, transforming the flat textile into a three-dimensional garment. But the weaving itself, the core of your craft, is complete. One quirky tidbit: some high-status Viking garments were so finely woven and elaborately decorated, perhaps with silk threads imported from the East, or intricate tablet-woven bands, that they would have represented an enormous investment of time and resources, truly luxury items. Even a more utilitarian piece, however, is a testament to significant labor. The scholarly debate sometimes touches upon the value of women's work in the Viking Age. While not always accorded the same public prestige as male achievements in warfare or exploration, the intrinsic value of textile production was undeniable. Without the constant output of weavers like you, Viking society simply could not have functioned. Your contribution, though often domestic and quiet, was foundational. As you fold the newly finished cloth, perhaps imagining its future wearer or its role in an upcoming voyage, there's a sense of purpose fulfilled. This is the quiet reward for your relentless grind, a moment of tangible success in a life defined by continuous effort. Each piece of fabric you create is a thread in the larger tapestry of your family's and community's survival and prosperity. As the long day of labor draws to a close, the light from the smoke hole in your longhouse roof fades from a pale gray to a deep smoky blue. The central hearth, which has been the heart of your home and workspace, now glows with embers. casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls. The rhythmic clack of your loom is silent for now, the spindle put away. A different set of sounds begins to fill the longhouse. The murmur of voices as the family gathers, the sizzle of evening meal preparations, perhaps the cry of a tired child. You, the Viking weaver, feel the deep ache of exhaustion in your bones, in your back from standing at the loom, in your shoulders from beating the weft, in your fingers from spinning and manipulating threads. But it's a familiar weariness, the satisfying fatigue that comes from a day of productive, essential work. Before you can truly rest, however, there are still tasks to attend to. The evening meal needs to be served, perhaps a stew that has been simmering all day, or more of the hearty porridge and flatbread that are staples of your diet. Water might need to be fetched, tools cleaned and stored for the night, children settled. Your day rarely has a clear off switch. This is also a time for planning, for looking ahead. You mentally review your stock of raw wool, your supply of spun yarn, the state of your dye stuffs. You think about the garments that need to be made or mended, the changing seasons and the demands they will bring. If a trading voyage is being planned, or if a family member is preparing for a long journey, you calculate the textiles that will be required. A new cloak, a sturdy sail patch, warm leggings. Your mind, even in weariness, is still partly on your craft, on the endless cycle of production. The quiet life is one of constant forethought and preparation. The scholarly debate sometimes considers the division of labor within the Viking household in the evenings. While men might spend time mending tools, carving wood, or engaging in social activities in the long haul, if they are of sufficient status, women's work often continued well into the evening, albeit perhaps at a slower pace, mending clothes by firelight, spinning a bit more yarn, tending to young children. There was always something that needed doing. This relentless continuity of labor is a key aspect of your endurance. One quirky, or perhaps poignant, detail is the importance of light. In an era without electricity, every hour of daylight was precious. Work that required good light, like fine weaving or intricate dyeing, had to be prioritized during the day. Evening tasks were those that could be done in the dim glow of the fire, or by the light of a simple oil lamp, a shallow stone or pottery dish with a wick floating in animal fat or fish oil. This reliance on natural light sources dictated the rhythm of your entire existence. As you finally prepare for sleep, perhaps on your straw pallet, near the warmth of the dying embers, you are not just ending a day. You are completing another small segment in the unending, vital loop of your life's work. The challenges are many, the comforts few by our standards, but there is a profound sense of purpose in your labor. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, the smoke hole will brighten, and the loom will call, its silent threads waiting to be woven into the fabric of another Viking day. And so, as the embers of the longhouse fire dwindle to a soft, orange glow, and a hush falls over the sleeping forms around you, your day as a Viking weaver concludes. It was a day of relentless effort, of transforming raw nair into essential utility, of quiet battles fought with skill, patience, and an enduring strength that often goes unsung in the grand sagas of your time. You are not a shield maiden famed in verse, nor a chieftain whose name echoes in the mead hall. Yet, your contribution is no less vital, no less heroic in its own way. Without your hands, and the hands of countless women like you, the Viking world with its far-ranging ships and resilient communities, simply could not exist. The gory details of your life are not found in the blood of battle, but in the calluses on your hands, the chronic ache in your back from the warp-weighted loom, the sting of smoke in your eyes, the constant risk of infection from a splintered tool or a burn from the dye pot. Your medical hardships are the unyielding realities of an era with little true understanding of disease or effective treatment, where survival often depended more on sheer constitution and a bit of luck than on any remedy. Your endurance is measured in the thousands of hours spent spinning an even thread, in the meticulous creation of intricate patterns in dim light, in the unwavering commitment to providing warmth and protection for your family against the harsh northern elements. The legacy you leave is not carved on runestones heralding great conquests, but is woven into every tunic that shields a body from the cold, every blanket that offers comfort in the long night, every sturdy sail that carries a longship towards new horizons or safely home. It's a legacy found in the very fabric of daily life, in the continuity of skills passed from mother to daughter, in the quiet strength that underpins the more visible exploits of your age. Scholars today meticulously analyze fragments of ancient textiles, marveling at the complexity of your weaves, the vibrancy of your dyes, the sheer industry represented by these fragile survivors from the past. They debate the specifics of your tools, the nuances of your techniques, trying to piece together the full story of your essential craft. As you, our modern listener, lie in your comfortable bed, far removed from the smoky confines of that Viking longhouse, let the rhythmic, almost monotonous cadence of that imagined day lull you into a state of deep relaxation. The challenges of that quiet life, the endless labor, the primitive conditions, the constant low-level hardships, can now fade into the background of your mind. You've glimpsed a world where survival was a daily art, and where the creation of something as seemingly simple as cloth was an act of profound significance and demanding resilience. There are no more fleeces to card, no more yarn to spin, no more heavy loom weights to adjust. The scent of wood smoke and lanolin dissipates. The distant sounds of the settlement give way to the quiet of your own peaceful surroundings. Let the understanding of that weaver's relentless grind, her unsung strength, deepen your appreciation for the comforts you now enjoy, and allow the story of her day to become a soft, distant murmur, guiding you gently towards the shores of sleep.